This interview was recorded on Thursday, May 21st, 2020, and conducted by 4 students at the Arts Academy at Benjamin Rush in a virtual classroom. My name is Rhonda Fetter, and I'm a civics teacher at our school. The interviewee is Mr. David Torres, who is on the Republican primary ballot, running for the House of Representatives, 2nd Congressional District. We're going to be recording this for other students to be able to see. I just want to let you know and make sure that that's okay with everybody.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Josh, our first student to speak.
Hi, I'm Joshua Barafaldi, and I'm a co-captain of the Rush Votes team. And I've gathered some students here to interview you with some questions. These are some of them, but we have a bigger team who helped create the questions and curate them. Without further ado, thank you very much for joining us today, Mr. Torres. We're very thankful to have you here so you can speak with us and we can ask you questions from us. First, do you think you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do or would like to do in office?
Like you said, my name is David Torres. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I came to Philadelphia as a young child, about 12 years old, and been here ever since. Fell in love with Philadelphia, and I've seen good and bad in Philadelphia, and I decided to run for Congress to kind of support and hopefully work on the 2nd Congressional District and the districts around it to improve the situation for us in Philadelphia. I've been in management for a long time. I've been in the medical field and in the sales and marketing field most of my entire life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And I think it's great that you've lived here and you want to help out in the community. We really value public service. Why are you running for the office, and why should voters pick you?
Well, I'm running for the office because I've seen that in the decline in, especially in parts of the city, when it comes to the educational system, when it comes to seniors, when it comes to general service for the public. I've seen a tremendous decline, and I'm concerned that um, putting both parties in the same plate, as I say, I've seen a lot of weaknesses. So I'm kind of trying to bring back unity between not only the parties, but giving actual uh, help to the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really noble. Um, so our first real question here is historically, not many people have been active in politics and know what decisions lawmakers make. And while it's certainly changing as our environment changes, why do you think it's important that politics be transparent? And how would you remain open to the public and allow us to know and learn what is happening so that we can better be engaged as citizens in our civic duties?
Well, that's a really good question. Politics in no way should not be transparent. We need every politician. We kind of I've been feeling that politicians start to say they're going to be transparent, and then when they get into office, uh, all of a sudden they kind of forget what they said, who they wrote, what they agreed on, what they voted on, and I think that's hurt us because I think as a public servant, as a politician, or as a servant in general to the public, you should be as transparent as possible so that people could know when each election comes up for a vote whether he or she has actually done what they promised to do and has addressed their platforms.
Uh, Thank you for answering that question. Um, Danny our Danny will
Yeah, me.
next one.
I'm Dan. Um, So my question is, with the power available in our government, what do you think the governing body, like the position, like the House of Representatives or the lawmakers, should be doing to prepare us all for the next wave of COVID-19, assuming it happens, such as support for getting people back to work and keeping us all healthy?
Well, I think that with COVID-19, we're caught in what I call a double-edged sword. We can't afford to continue to keep the country closed for financial reasons, but we also need to be extremely careful and wise as we open. We need to be, as a government, as alert and as possible, look at where our vulnerabilities are. Obviously, we're seeing those. And where we're vulnerable at is to keep that population not working, and making sure that they're keeping the safe distances and wearing the face masks and the hand washing, et cetera, et cetera. And then the population that we can get back to work and the areas that are safe, make sure that we open them up at a slow pace with which we can monitor just in case we get another outbreak. I mean, the pandemic that we're hit with now is new to us, so we don't know. Thank God that we have technology that we can communicate with each other and keep things transparent and an open conversation so that we can monitor what's happening. I think that we need to open up the country. We do not have a choice. We can't keep spending, and nothing coming in. It's just not logical. There's no way the country's going to keep moving forward. But we can't risk um, the epidemic hitting us again. And if it does come, we got to try to minimize as much as we can.
Yeah.
Another wave.
All right. Well, thank you for asking that. And then what advice do you have to give to the people who are still stuck at home?
Well, still what?
Stuck at home.
Stuck at home. Well, I mean, I think that people that are stuck at home, I think they got to try to be patient. We got to try to use the internet, invent things, or start to come back as a family and as a unit. I know that's what I'm trying to do for myself at home. And I'm telling my friends and families to do it, that maybe we can do certain things in the house that we haven't done. Spend some more time, watch a couple of movies, keep the young ones at home and teach them to cook and bake and make it a family time to 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 keep us with our minds, a little bit of sanity in our minds, and not having it where we're locked up and can't come out and breathe. I think that I'm trying to get people to devote more as a family and as a unit and do as much as you can together, and not keep it like a closed in, like we're being punished.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks.
All right. My name's Allison, and my question was, with COVID stopping a lot of our traffic and a lot of people going out and sort of limiting what we can do in terms of going out and stuff, a lot of people have seen benefits on the environment all across the world. And while, like you said, we can't stay under lockdown forever, what do you think can be done after this is all over to help cities like Philadelphia better deal with the climate crisis and preservation of our environment? And also, what do you think young people can do to sort of help that effort?
Um, can you repeat the question again? Because I kind of caught three different parts on that one.
Sure. The question was, what do you think can be done to help cities better deal with the climate crisis and like preservation of our environment? And what specifically can young people be doing to help that effort?
But I believe the climate issue is a very serious issue for us. We can't continue to be ignorant to the fact that we are destroying things around us. Um, I honestly say that mankind is its own worst enemy. We take things for granted. We don't do things. As young people, we could start to help seniors if they need help with things at home. We can, as young people, try to maintain our areas cleaner. If you see people of friends of yours who may be fixing their cars in the street, for example, pouring oil on the streets and transmission fluid and antifreeze. These are all toxic things, and we should be able to talk to them and say, without getting yourself in trouble, and say, listen, this is hurting our environment. You know, if we plant more trees as a youth, one of the programs that I'm looking to put together is a tree planting program starting out here in Philadelphia for several reasons. So if we plant more trees, we help with the oxygen levels, we help with the environment, keeping things clean. I think things in that nature. But my program that I want to get put together for tree movement, planting movement, is um, something that I'm looking forward to.
All right, thank you so much.
Hi, Mr. Torres. My name is Fatin S. I was also part of the Rush Arts Votes team here. I arrived due to some technical difficulties a little later. But for your next question from us would be, many students in Philadelphia and across the country don't feel safe in school, especially in the wake of mass shootings and school shootings. And many young people across the country have felt gun control laws are in need of reform, as evident in countrywide walkouts and protests. What is your stance on this important issue?
Well, the Second Amendment it's important to me. I believe in the Second Amendment. I think that the school shootings um, uh, and children being afraid to go back to school and the mass shootings are something that we have to address. One of the things that I've been saying that we should look at as far as school shootings is that we don't have the safety surrounding um, our children to make the environment safe for them. We have plenty of retired police officers, retired veterans, people who have been trained to protect, who have served and have protected us in a long time. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to come up with some kind of budget in Congress so that we can get these individuals who care, who love, who honor our country and want to protect our kids to be actually working inside these schools and be there to protect them. I can guarantee you that if you go to veterans who are retired, you go to retired police officers, they will come and answer the call for help and protect us. Not that I want anybody to be, you know, carrying weapons. We need to be very careful on background checks. I think we need to get harder at times with background checks because, and I feel that no matter what you do, you know, we got to protect our borders and our way of entry because the criminals are out there, and no matter what you do, the criminals are still going to get their hands on these guns. And what's happening in the schools, though, regrettably, because to me, one life lost, one child is one too many. So I think it's a deterrent if we have retired police officers, retired veterans protecting our schools while the kids are in school all day, not just having a police car outside when they're coming in and the first thing in the morning, but all the time to be there. And I think that we need to be, like I said, stricter on our gun laws. We need to be strict on our gun laws with respect to background checks. We just can't allow people to have the ability to have a weapon at home. For example, if a person has a legally purchased gun in the house, and someone in the family or a family member or has already been afterwards diagnosed with um, a mental health crisis, and he or she is a danger to herself or others, there should be a mechanism that communicates that individual's status and family, and with the powers to be that control the guns and the information on the guns, and if they're legal, then maybe there should be a way that they can be taken away from them, not permanently, but until the situation either comes under control, and if it doesn't, then you're just never going to get it back. So it's Second Amendment is one thing, but putting people at risk is a totally different issue. So there's two different things that I'm looking at. It's the legal people who get weapons, and then there's a crisis in the family, in the household, and then the criminals that are out there.
Okay, thank you very much for your question.
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, even as a student, as a senior, we've seen a lot very recently with kids not feeling safe, and I think it's very important that we bring that up to Congress even more. Um, in reference to schools, there is the topic of standardized testing, such as the PSSAs, SATs. What is your opinions of these kinds of standardized tests students take in high school and elementary school?
Well, I think that I like the idea of standardized testing because of you need to know where a student is at, where he or she may be at, and where he or she is in need of support and help. I believe that every student has has we have the obligation to ensure that every student, no matter what the level of that person to be able to absorb what he or she can absorb in school, needs to have as much support and be guided to the best way they can um, function and feel that they've reached their potential. It isn't my responsibility to, or government responsibility to assure or tell a student you can't, you're never going to be I don't know, an astronaut. But that person may be good in with their hands, um, and there's nothing wrong with seeing if they like the skills of, say, wood shop. We don't have that in school anymore. We don't have health education in schools anymore. We don't have mechanics in schools anymore, and that affects people because that it seems like to me the school system is limiting them, and it hurts teachers because teachers, they're not in the system to get rich. Let's face it, no teacher comes out rich. They're there because they love the idea and they grew up with the idea of I want to be a teacher, and that person was affected by another teacher, and that's the same thing. If the teacher sees that this child is not interested in things that are going to make that they'll need to do to go to college, but that child may be interested in home economics, cooking, like I said, a mechanic, a plumber, some kind of fundamental job. And these are not little jobs because they make good money. I have relatives who are doctors, and I got relatives who are plumbers. And trust me, when a doctor has a problem with plumbing, he's calling the plumber, vice versa. So we need to be able to support the school system, be able to make sure these tests are there, look at where their weaknesses are, help support them, and then help the teachers and have the teachers given the tools to be able to get these students into the direction they need to go on, whatever the field may be.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. But just with your view on individualized learning and personal relationships with teachers, do you believe that government mandated standardized tests are necessary? And do you think that income inequality that affects schools and funding may provide different levels of education for these meeting these standardized tests?
Well, I think that every school should be able to provide and have the funds necessary and the tools necessary to exercise what that school system sees and what them teachers see the need for. Standardized testing to me, I like because it might be a tool for teachers to look at and evaluate each child. Remember, the government's not there. A congressman, a senator, they're not in the school system. They're not the ones seeing when the frustration with a child is there and where he or she is weakest at, and where he or she is strongest at. And there's got to be a way to support that. I believe that funding, no, if you're in, well, I don't know, if you're in the best high schools in Washington, D.C., they should have the same resources for people who are on Fifth and York, who are on the boulevard, because a school is in a lower income area, that shouldn't mean that the teachers don't have the tools and the funding and the resources, and it shouldn't be a struggle for students, and it shouldn't be a struggle for teachers to have to worry about where the pencils and the crayons and the books and computers are coming from. That to me, that's a joke. It's a joke because there's plenty of ways to try to work on making sure that every child comes into school and there should be a standard laptop for them to work with. That's just my opinion.
Thank you very much for your view, Mr. Torres. Allison, do you have the next question?
Throughout the history of schooling, we've made really great strides to be more inclusive and more welcoming to all students of all backgrounds. But there's still a lot of students that don't feel safe or feel that they're not being properly represented or respected in school environments. And so my question is, how can we better manage and deal with discrimination and prejudice in schools, especially racial discrimination?
Was that the last one?
Yeah. Could you repeat the question? We had a bit of a technical problem here and everything.
Yeah, I'll repeat the question.
Sorry.
It's okay. So I said that throughout the history of schooling, we've made great strides to be more inclusive and more welcoming to students of all backgrounds. But there's still a lot of students that don't feel safe or don't feel represented or respected in their school environment. And so my question is, how can we better manage and deal with discrimination and prejudice in schools, especially racial discrimination?
Well, that sure is a tough question. I think that we need to have a class that's just on racial sensitivity, racial discrimination of any type, whether it be a gender, whether it be a race, whether it be one race to another, or one political issue to another, or one sexual issue to another. I think that we need to have some kind of a class that teaches people to be sensitive when it comes to other people and other needs, and to get students to understand that we all hurt, we all feel the pain, we all suffer, we don't like to be treated bad, and and to remember, especially if they're, for example, Latinos. My mother and definitely my grandmother here were it was difficult for them to learn to speak the English language. So they did feel uncomfortable. Um, but one thing that our parents also taught us was that we need to be sensitive to somebody else. Do not allow. I think that between teaching, education in the classroom, making sure that if people are being bullied and there's bullies people or people treating them disrespectful for whatever the reason, that person needs to be in one of these definite classes that he or she understands that this is not tolerable for us, and that we need to support as much as we can new people coming into our system who may not be feeling comfortable because of whatever the reason. Like I said, language barrier, a race issue, a gender issue. We just can't afford anymore to go back in the old days where people were just treated differently. It's 2020. We need to make sure we support as much as we can. But again, that goes back to basic education, and providing the sources so people can get, for example, a pamphlet that's given to each student at the beginning of the year. If it continues to go on as they come in and the new students being transferred one school to another, you may need to read this pamphlet and answer some questions to it so that you could, some teachers could pick up if there's going to be an issue. We just need, education is the biggest piece, and I think that we need to tackle it as we do a regular class.
All right, thank you so much. I think Danny was going to take the next question. If you want to.
Yeah. So my group and I did some background research on you, and we know that through personal experience, the opioid crisis has claimed a lot of grief in your life and in the lives of millions of Americans across the country. We want you to know. Oh, we want to know what you plan on doing about the crisis, and how can you prevent the deaths of many people who don't know that what they're getting into or feel that there's no way out, and how can you especially help young people stay safe?
All right. And that comes at different levels. Again, thank you for acknowledging the loss that I personally had. But there's people dying all around, and it's affecting youth as well as parents, as well as family households. As the opiate crisis is an incredible crisis, but with the cost that it's given us and what it's taking away from us as a family, as a unit, and as just citizens of this country, has to be addressed. What I would personally thinking of doing was to support and see how we can get people to understand that there needs to be there needs to be a system where we're going to put into place where we're going to push constant commercials, constant lectures, maybe getting people to be visiting schools and having on a group auditorium hearing and talking and films about what it is, how to identify when there's issues going on, how to get help, what is the opiate crisis, how it's getting to you, because the opiate crisis doesn't just affect children. It affects if there's a father in the household who got a prescription and he or she has been on it for 30 days. Well, guess what? After that 30 days, he or she ain't coming off it that easy. So that doesn't only affect that gentleman or that person. It affects the wife. It affects the children at home. It affects the jobs. There's a lot of things that we need to do as counselors, as groups, counselors in schools, and again, a lot of educational material to give the children, auditorium classes where you have the half the school or quarter of the school, whatever the principal sees is a good thing, and just put films out, educational films on what it is, how what's going on, and not to be afraid to go to get help, because that's the other thing. There's a stigma where people go out and they come to me and they say, yeah, I want to get help, Dave, but I'm scared to go get help because it's gonna involve child health programs, and it's gonna involve DHA, and it's gonna involve my husband being pulled out, and what if they take the kids away from us, etc. There's a lot of things going on, and there's a lot of people out there who are dealing these drugs. That's another issue that we got to face and say, they can't continue, because to me, a person dealing drugs is just as guilty as as the companies that are making it so easy and the doctors that are making it so easy for it to be available. We need to be strong on the opiate crisis, and we need to get our politicians and everybody involved in what's happening with the when it comes to the opiate crisis. It's an incredible pain. The recovery in my house, I could tell you alone, with my wife, it's never been the same, and that's part of where we need more counseling, we need support. It's just not enough out there.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience with us, and we really do hope that Congress can do its part in helping educate the youth and helping educate everyone on how dangerous these substances can be and how easy it is to fall into them. With important issues like this, it's very important that leaders we can depend on to protect and service their communities. And for the upcoming June 2nd primary election, my team and I have spent a lot of time and effort getting our peers excited and registering them to vote, and taking them step by step and registering for things like mail-in ballots. And well, now that the date is fast approaching for us in Pennsylvania, Many candidates have dropped out of the race before we even got the chance to vote. How do you feel about primary elections and the current electoral system? What do you think Congress could do to make our votes more equal to those who could have voted earlier?
When you're referring to those who dropped out, you're talking about people who just don't want to vote anymore?
I'm referring to the fact that our election here in Pennsylvania is on June 2nd, but there have been elections across the country starting from January and February, and many political candidates who may have gained traction back then have dropped out by now. And we think it's unfair that we never got the chance to really vote um, on these elections in the primaries because our election is so late. And so we are wondering how you felt about the current electoral system.
Oh, okay, good. I mean, that's an excellent question. I've always been concerned about that because as it's been the history of the way voting has been running in this country, it usually starts at one end of one part of the country and it keeps working its way back to gets to the primary. Different states have different primary times and different electoral dates. It's hard. It shows where politicians come in and you could wind up with 10, 15 politicians running for example, president. And by the time you get to the middle of the primary election, you wind up with people losing out. It's just the way the system is set. I think that it would be ideal if everybody in the country voted at the same time, but I just don't see it being a reality right now. The way the system is set up, they would have to change the entire system, and I think that before you can try to change the dates of how you would have everybody vote at the same time for anything. For example, the presidential race itself in November is different. The primary is one thing, and we all know that in November it's a whole different story. But we would have to get Congress to come together and figure out what is it that constituents want. Go back to your constituents, see how they feel about it, and then put it up to an actual vote to see if we can come up with a date, a standard date, and say everybody in the country votes this day, so that you don't miss out in the primary. But when you're going to the primary and you're going through the elections and you're going through the process, as you're learning each state as it has its time limit, and as you're going, you get to see the stronger and then the weaker candidates that you have. So as the weaker candidates drop out, it gives an individual the opportunity to say, okay, we are left with A, B, C, and D, and now let's see what these individuals really have to put on the table and offer. And how did you manage to get to this point? What are the strong views for this candidate and what are the weak ones? So you wind up with the candidate from any party that's ready to run, that you're going to go behind for the general election.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would hope that the issue gets brought to Congress and um, legislators can make a decision on and ask what the constituents want. But we have one last question.
That's why I said that it has to have the Congress and Senate and go to their constituents, because sometimes we forget and the people forget that you voted somebody in, somebody interviewed for a job, you gave them that job, you voted him or her in, and that person needs to answer to the constituents. It's not the other way around. And what you put on your platform is one thing, and issues that come up is another. And you should be having town halls and meetings once you're in Congress or in Senate, and you should be talking to your people, listen to what they want to say. Maybe, and to me, maybe you should have individual votes in your town halls and find out where the groups are at with things, because we need to respect our constituents. And I think a lot of times we're not getting that respect as constituents. And that's one of the issues that I have that bothers me a lot. I see plenty of people go into office and then they kind of forget that, you were hired to do a job. And if you're a teacher or you're a police officer or you're a fireman and your call for duty comes up and you don't do it, then you lose your job. Then why should we have people sitting in Congress and the Senate for years and years and years telling you the same issues are the problem? Education's a problem. Medicare is a problem. Medication's a problem for seniors. Well, you've been saying this for 20 years, buddy. Give us something else. Tell us what you did, how you're trying to address it. Go back to your people, and the people need to see if the person they hired is the person they want to keep there. If you have the people evaluate the person they sent up and that they liked in the beginning, did he or she do what he or she promised? Did they make an effort? I think if we make everybody, including myself, if I win, accountable for what I said I was going to do and what the issues are, we won't have half the arguments and problems in Washington. Because you go to Washington after you win, you win a position for Congress. You have a responsibility to everybody, not to your party, to everybody in your district, regardless of what party they come from. And I think we kind of politically, we're kind of separating, and that's not the way to be.
Thank you very much for your view. It's very important to us, I mean, especially this group, but everybody, that we have politicians who represent us and who carry out what the people want them to do. And following that, I think it's very important that we have engaged citizens who take the time to vote for what they believe is right. And so our last question for you, Mr. David Torres, why do you think it's important for young people to vote?
Young people have, God, I wish I had the opportunity again that they have now. Young people need to get involved. Young people need to know that when you have politicians out there, you have the responsibility to monitor them. You're sending them to do a job for you. Your vote says what's going to happen to your schools. Your vote says what's going to happen to physical spending. Your vote's going to say whether we're going to spend $2 trillion. Are we going to raise taxes? How we're going to deal with immigration? How we're going to deal with the seniors? What's happening with Social Security? Your vote tells the future, because remember, as you vote, you take a responsibility and you take an interest about what's happening to your country, and it's your future. Because if you allow Congress to run amok, they could spend, say, for example, thank God we were able to do it and come together as a country. But if we continue to make our debt higher, and the youth are going to be responsible for that debt. It's not me. It's going to be my kids and my kids' kids, and maybe 3 or 4 generations down. We're going to pay for it. And the younger generation needs to see what mistakes were made in the past, where we're going today, and what we need to do in the future. And I think they're the best ones to judge that, because they have the tools that we didn't have then. They have the ability, they have the hunger for the vote, they have the hunger for knowledge, and they can make good choices for themselves. And what I tell them to do, don't do it as a party. Do it as individuals. Look at each individual and say, which one of these guys? Because in the beginning, it's one thing in the primary. But at the end, and it hits November, who is the person that's going to best do what we need for our community? That decision is a powerful one. It's an important one. And it's something that every student should be empowered to do for themselves. Research, look, and pick the best individual there is.
Well, Thank you again, Mr. Torres. I mean, that certainly is the core of what we're trying to do, trying to engage young people like ourselves, engaging our peers to vote. So thank you for what you said. Thank you again very much for coming to this interview and making yourself available to people like us. And thank you, Ms. Fetter, for bringing opportunities like this to us so we can stay engaged and educated. Um, this is the end of the interview. We are the Rush Votes team, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much for watching our interview. We at the Rush Votes team have our own mission to get everyone possible registered to vote and to be able to register everyone for a mail-in ballot. There are links in the description below to help you get started. It's really quick and easy, and it's the best way to have your voice heard in your community. Thank you.